Hey everyone, so this video is about checking your internet speed. And the reason I'm doing this one is because I recently upgraded from a 50 megabit per second down 5 up to a 100 megabit per second down 10 up connection. And there's a couple of resources, and the reason I mention it is because I came across this CNET article. I'll try to remember to link it below, but if you search for this, you'll find it. And it's about seeing if your internet is being throttled, even if you don't think that it is. So one of the sort of go-to tests that people use is speed test, and you can just go to speedtest.net, and I'll open up a new one here. You go to speedtest.net, click go. You'll probably see some ads around here. I've got an ad blocker. But click go, and it will give you your results. So I've got 100 down, 10 up. That's my service. And those values are always plus minus 10%. So you can see what this is showing is 94.17 down, 9.61 up, within the 10%, and 4 milliseconds ping. Ping is latency. So basically, with every sort of connection that needs to be made, there's first a handshake, and then there's the data that's transferred. So ping, you can think of as how long does it take to do that handshake? And then the speed is after that handshake, where your computer has talked to another one and said, hey, I'm going to send or receive something. The speed is how quickly does it actually do that operation after the fact. So where ping matters is if you've got a lot of small connections and a lot of ping, it can seem like it's taking forever, even if your speed is really high. So 4 milliseconds ping is really good. The higher it is, the worse it is. So 4 is decent. At any rate, according to speed test, I should be fine. I'm within 10% of 100 down, 10 up. But when I check using speed.measurementlab.net, you can see what I'm actually getting is 73.2 and 8.73, which would lead me to believe that I may be being throttled. And so who's doing this throttling? It's not my devices, it's not my stuff, because I can get this basically theoretical 110, but I'm not getting it in a more real world scenario. And this is usually has to do with your internet service provider, could have to do with your DNS, could be something else in your system that's causing it. So to get a more real world feel of the speeds you're getting, check this speed.measurementlab.net. Now, if you were to go to your ISP like Comcast or Turkcell or Super Online or Time Warner or whatever, they're going to basically go by this value and they're going to say, oh, you're getting 110. But if you're having trouble, you might try this one and just see, am I really getting that, or am I being throttled by that same service provider for something? And what MLab does is it basically tests more real world conditions. The reason is, at least in the US, and I think in most other countries, since we don't have net neutrality anymore, your internet service provider can choose to give your internet connection more speed going to certain websites, or take away speed going to certain websites. And it works kind of in the same way, like you'll hear about this in the news now and then, where some country has blocked social media, or like in Iran, they blocked Facebook. Right? People aren't allowed to go to it. In the same way, your internet service provider can slow down or speed up connections to certain websites. So again, this will give you more of a real world feel for what you're actually getting in normal usage. Now the other thing to bear in mind is these tests are done hardwired. So there's a wire going from my computer directly to the router. A lot of people use only Wi-Fi and they don't even think about plugging the wire in. Now I want to show you the difference. Let me see here. This is my computer, my home theater PC, which is about 12 feet away. And normally this door is open. So it's 3-4 meters away. And it's nearly a line of sight. Now this is using a wireless N card. And I can show you actually. It was basically the cheapest card that I could get when I went to the store. And it has a maximum theoretical data throughput of 150 megabits per second. So if the max theoretical is 150, and I'm only getting 100 from my internet service provider, I should easily be able to get that full 100. But as you can see, that's only theoretical. My ping has gone from 4 to 5 milliseconds, which is still small, which is still pretty good. But you can see that while my upload is still 9.18 as compared to 9.61, my download is dropped down as 35.7. Now when you look at connection speed, even though the maximum theoretical is 150, it's actually operating at 135. And a few moments ago when I ran the test, it was only showing a connection speed of 65 megabits per second. And so that maximum theoretical can actually be lower than, the maximum theoretical can actually be higher than what you get in practice. You know, it's like they say, in theory and practice are the same thing, but in practice they're very different. So let's try this other test on this same computer again. It's just a few feet away. I'm gonna look and see exactly what the website is. I think I can copy paste this. Yeah. Let's see what I get when I test it through this second testing website here. It should just take a moment or two. So again, this is testing more of a real world usage type of scenario. So what I was getting was 35.74, 9.18 on speedtest.net, which is sort of the de facto. Using this other one, I'm getting 32.65, 884. That's not far off. It's still about 10% lower, a little under 10% lower for download, and a little bit lower for upload, though that's really negligible. But the big difference you can see is this enormous difference between on Wi-Fi with a wireless and adapter versus plugged in, hardwired. Now if you have wireless AC, especially if it's 5 gigahertz wireless AC, that should be faster. It might be closer to 100 megabits per second, but there's always going to be some overhead. So there's a couple things to remember here. Wired is always faster than Wi-Fi, so long as you're talking about similar devices. So if you've got a 20-year-old PC and it's wired, it's probably going to be slower than a brand new PC Wi-Fi. But if you've got similar devices, wired is typically faster, and it's definitely much more consistent. And that's one of the big things too. So with wireless, if you've got a situation where, let's say you're watching a Netflix video or something like that, and it'll play for a while and then buffer for 5 minutes, and then play for a while and buffer for 5 minutes, your speed might be fine. You might have 70 megabits per second, which is more than enough for 1080p video to transfer without a problem. But you might not have a consistent connection, which is part of the problem with Wi-Fi, that inconsistency. I've seen it as bad as simply walking around your house or your apartment. You can tell the difference when your signal gets higher and lower. And you can see the difference can be quite substantial. I mean, we're talking less than half the speed here, less than half the speed of wired. But furthermore, the other thing to keep in mind is that the theoretical connection as compared to the actual usable real-world connection can be quite a bit different as well. I mean, when we're talking 94 compared to 73, that's what, like a 15% difference, something like that, in a real world, in a more real world usage scenario. And this is probably down to my service provider here. Now, sometimes these will be exactly the same, in which case, wonderful. In a perfect world with net neutrality everywhere, they should be the same. But because of the ability of ISPs to throttle and of individual countries and even states to play around with things, you're probably going to see something lower. So anyways, these two tools should work pretty well to give you a good idea of whether or not you're getting what you paid for. Again, if you're talking to your internet service provider, they're probably going to go by this speed test result as to whether or not what you have is fast enough. But if you're comparing providers, you might want to look at how does this compare with this? How does the more, even though it's not exactly theoretical, how does this sort of ideal situation test compare with the real world situation test? And, then again, how does that all compare to the same test on Wi-Fi? So anyways, that's all. Hopefully that helps somebody, especially with school starting up shortly here. I'm sure people will be talking about connection issues and having connection issues. Hopefully this helps people to figure stuff out.